Okay, good morning. As mentioned, there's two presentations. I was there in Dominica with fellow student Gabrielle. So I'm going to try to keep this short. There's another presentation from Gabrielle. She's going to be doing a presentation through a voice recording as part of her presentation. So we'll keep the question at the end after Gabrielle's presentation. So once again, my name is Nathan McCorrister. I'm originally from the Peguis First Nation. I'm one of the part-time students. I'm just going into my last year of study in the MDP program. I've been here 4 years now part-time, so I got the chance to, the opportunity to work with all the cohorts since the inception of the program. So it's been both an honor and privilege to be taking the program and also to have had the opportunity to visit the Kalinago territory in Dominica this past spring and summer. So Dominica is a small Caribbean island of approximately 751 square kilometers with a population of 72,000 people. The population is made up of 86% of black people, and with indigenous people making up 2.9%. So it's a really small island, a relatively small population. It was certainly an experience going there and experiencing that, coming from Canada and seeing a lot of the opposites in terms of size of the landmass and the ethnicity of the people. The official language is English, in addition to French patois and Antillean Creole are widely spoken. The indigenous Kalinago language is called Mapuwika. The Kalinago people of the Carib Reserve, also known as the Kalinago Territory, are one of only a few indigenous peoples whom remain in the Caribbean islands and their traditional territory. The Kalinago Territory has a population of approximately 4,500, and there are another 4,500 Kalinago living elsewhere on Dominica or on other islands. The reserve or territory make up approximately 3,700 acres of land located on the northeastern part of Dominica. So just to give you a map of where Dominica is, it's located in the Caribbean area, in the Caribbean Sea area. You have the Atlantic on the north side, and you have the Caribbean Sea on the south side. You have Florida up there, and you have South America down here, so you kind of get an idea of where it's located. Some of the more popular resort islands are nearby, like Barbados. So you have to fly into one of the more popular resort islands to fly to Dominica. Dominica is it's not considered one of the the popular resort islands. It's considered a developing country, and there's definitely differences there when you compare compared with the other islands. There's a map of the actual island itself. So you can see the Carib territory is located on the north, west side of the island. Where we were located is within the territory close to Salabi or Sinkyu, sort of right in between there. That's where the Carib territory is located in the actual reserve. Some background. The host was actually Councillor Irvin's August. Fortunately for us, we had a chance to meet Councillor Irvin's August before we left to Dominica. He was here visiting, and so we had a chance to visit with him and talk to him about Dominica and the Kalinago Territory and some of the work we were going to be doing there. Also, another host at the time was Chief Garnet Joseph, whom we met when we arrived in the Kalinago Territory. And after talking with both Irvins and Chief Joseph, they shared with me a lot of the issues around land management and planning and economic development for the Kalinago Territory. Some of the issues that we had talked about and that they shared with me was the territory itself is very similar to a lot of First Nation communities in Canada. They have reserve lands there that's held in common for the community, for their members, which is very similar to a lot of First Nation communities here in Canada. One of the issues that they share with me was that they feel that some of their land is being encroached upon by the national Dominican government and non-Kalinago people. One of the reasons is the reserve boundaries are not clearly demarcated or surveyed, and also another issue is because there's a lack of land surveys. There's also issues with internal disputes in terms of the boundaries internally within the reserve itself. Of course, this results in a lot of community member disputes over over land allotments that are held in common by a lot of the families that live in the Kalinago. There's also problems with community members wanting to sell and purchase land within the territory. There's no clear process or market for this to occur, and as well there are some members wanting to access business loans and as such look at their land as a way to access financial capital. The Kalinago people want to protect the reserve land as it's also a part of their identity as an Indigenous people. So despite the drawbacks with having reserve land, they also want to keep their reserve land. They don't want private land or to privatize their land because they want to protect their identity as Indigenous people and to protect their lands for their people. This is just a couple of pictures in the field, in the territory. The first one on the left, basically what was happening was the Kalinago Council, on a daily basis, they have to deal with a lot of these disputes, and they spend quite a bit of time in trying to resolve these disputes. So they have to go out, meet with the families, visit the sites where the land is in dispute to look at boundaries. And so you have, in the first picture, you have the Chief Garnet Joseph in the orange, and I think one of the council members in the red. They're going down a steep ravine. A lot of the Kalinago territory and also in Dominique is it's a mountainous area, a lot of rainforests, a lot of these ravines. So they're up and going up. We were going up and down ravines, looking at boundaries, and basically what they were doing was just trying to find where the traditional boundary was of these allotments, and they were looking at really just physical markers that were there because a lot of the land wasn't surveyed. So they're looking at trees, coconut trees, banana trees, and just trying to figure out where boundaries were, or old fence posts, old fences, and taking ropes and having to cut line physically, and trying to cut line to determine where the boundary was. And as they're doing this, the picture on the right, I don't know if you can see clearly there, but there's a couple of people on top of the hill. Those two people were the ones that were in dispute. There's a couple of families that live next to each other, and they're looking at, they're standing there looking at some of the council members and myself as we're there trying to look at where this boundary was. And having going through that experience, you could see that people really feel a sense of, ownership over their allotments because the allotments are so small. You're talking about 1 to 2 acre allotments. And so it was quite a challenge, or quite interesting to see, what they have to go through to try to resolve the dispute and talk to the people and try to come up with some agreement on where the boundary was. And so this, this is a big problem for the territory. So with my research, I began researching and scanning the existing information, reports and plans that was produced over the last 10, 20 years by various national Dominican government departments, NGOs, consultants, and other groups. What we found was that there was quite a bit of work done already by other groups, outside groups that came into the territory and was working with the council over the years. And after talking to community leadership and community members and reviewing various previous reports and plans, it was determined that what was needed was more of an action plan than another study or report. So that was one of the things we found early on with myself and Gabrielle, was that instead of doing another study or report, we thought, there's so many already, let's try to bring all these reports and plans together and really develop an action plan, a strategic plan to really look at the recommendations that were done and pull it together and help the community actually implement them. And so that's really what we try to focus on. So the strategic plan would incorporate previous recommendations on land management, economic development, and provide a clear action and implementation plan. Early on, I developed a terms of reference or proposal that would clearly set out the work I would be undertaking, including objectives and approaches. The strategic plan is a tool the Kalinago would utilize to focus their efforts and strategize implementing previous reports and plans. The strategic plan would highlight all previous recommendation plans on land management and economic development, The strategic plan sets out a summary of previous recommendations and an action plan to implement the recommendations. The strategic plan also focuses on financial and human resource challenges with the community that they face to implement the strategy. Included in the strategy, so as such, they're included in the strategy is recommendations to access outside financial resources and to build human resource and infrastructure capacity from within the community. So what we realized early on was, yes, we could develop a strategic plan, an action plan, but really there's still, the community would still be challenged with limited financial resources and human resources, human capacity to actually implement the plans. So we thought we would try to include in the strategy ways to help with those challenges or barriers. Some of the challenges I faced. Again, I recognized early on there was a lack of capacity in human resources. The financial resources of the community are very limited, even compared to a lot of First Nation communities in Canada. Although I would say that in northern communities in Canada is very similar to, I found a lot of similarities between northern communities in Canada and the Kalinago in terms of capacity and access to resources. I thought there was a lot of similarities there. Also access and knowledge of previous research, reports and plans. There's no real central administrative library or corporate, what they would call corporate or government knowledge, because the staff in the office are essentially, there's only 5 staff, and the chief works full time, and then the councillors are like volunteer. So it's the capacity there and the knowledge about what's happened or what's transpired in the past. It was a challenge to try gather that information. It took some time to really look at what they had in the office and then talk to individuals that were part of council over the years and various staff and trying to gather the information. Also, time was a factor. I realized early on that I wasn't going to have enough time. I wasn't as long as I probably should have, given one of the challenges I had was I worked full time for my community, so it was difficult for myself to get time away. So that was a challenge. So what I did was I tried to focus on the field work while I was there, gathering information, talking to people, talking to community members and leadership, and just trying to get as much work as I could in terms of gathering information, and also being in the field and seeing some of these land disputes, seeing some of these land management issues and economic development issues. And then what I had done was, once I did that, I carried on my work once I returned to Canada. Also, I had some health concerns while in Dominica. It wasn't serious. I had contacted a virus through a mosquito bite. It's called chikungunya. It's one of a new viruses that are now, I guess, is being found in the Caribbean. It started off I think in Asia and Africa. It's more common now. It's found here, and I read a recent news report where they found the first case in Florida. I think it was over the summer. So it wasn't serious. You just go through the symptoms, and then it just has to run its course. There's no cure for it. But once the symptoms run its course, that's it. It's done. So it wasn't serious, but it did set me back a bit in terms of my time there, and also when I returned to Canada, I had contacted it just before I ended my stay in the territory. So it's one of the challenges of visiting internationally, is there's always that threat, I guess, of contacting something like that. Some Indigenous similarities. Similar to many First Nation communities in Canada, the Kalinago face similar challenges and barriers to land management related to land-based economic development, as I mentioned earlier. We have reserves here in Canada. Essentially, they have the same type of reserve in Dominica, and they're faced with the same challenges we are. And there's a lot of similar land management issues, land use planning issues that we face in Canada that we have in Canada and Dominica. The national government imposed laws and policies to the resurgence of Indigenous governance and modern-day economic development. The Kalinago have the same challenges to many Indigenous people around the world, but also the opportunity for development of their own Indigenous ways and knowing. In conclusion, as an Indigenous person in Canada and having grown up in my home community of Peguis First Nation, the opportunity to undertake my practicum in an internationally and in an Indigenous community was both exciting and a humbling learning experience. I was very grateful for our host, the Kalinago People and Council. I developed a long-term, I think I'm going to be developing a long-term relationship there with them and connection with them. I was in touch with Irvins recently, and we're talking about a cultural exchange now, possibly with their community and our community, and possibly looking at some youth cultural exchange. We're also talking about arts. They need some help with developing some of the arts in their community, and we're talking about how we can work together on that. Just a couple of pictures, last ones. On the right is myself and Irvins, Councillor Irvins, August, and on the left, my left, is Chief Garnet Joseph and one of the staff in the office. In the building and behind it is actually the Kalinago office located in the territory. Okay, we'll leave the question for the end. We have Gabrielle's presentation. Is there time to, it's very brief. Okay.
Hi everyone, greetings all the way from Ottawa. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there with all of you in person, hearing about all of your interesting experiences, but I certainly hope to catch up with all of you in the near future. For my placement, I was in Dominica for 3 months, from the beginning of May to the end of July. So Nathan and I overlapped for about 5 weeks, though we worked on different projects. So in my presentation, I'm going to talk about those projects and about my overall experience in Dominica. One of my first projects was to participate in writing a proposal for a credit facility for the Kalinago people. Because land in the territory is owned collectively, individuals are not able to use their land or their houses as collateral to access loans from mainstream financial institutions. The Kalinago chief, Garnet Joseph, and some members of the community had decided to propose the development of this facility that would take the form of a loan to the Kalinago Council from the Agriculture, Industry and Development Bank of Dominica. Then the council would use that loan to issue smaller loans to individuals in certain priority areas like agriculture and small business development, home building and repair. So I was able to take a supporting role, assisting in writing this proposal. We produced a first draft, and at the time I left, it was still being prepared for submission. I also worked on a survey of financial institutions in Dominica to inquire about their policies and practices when it comes to lending to Kalinago clients, and to find out what their perspective is on the challenges and opportunities there. Due to time constraints, I was only able to interview a representative from one financial institution. Finally, I worked on putting together a practical guide to alternate sources of funding for individuals and groups seeking funds for projects, small businesses, etc. Examples included crowdfunding, as well as various agencies and organizations that offer funding. And there are some young people in the community who've talked about putting the guide online for easier access and updating, so that's a next step. I also had the honor and privilege of attending a workshop on land issues in which community members discussed issues related to the land, their concerns, and their vision of the future. They generated a number of recommendations with the purpose of developing a strategic plan. And of course, as you might be able to tell from my pictures, Dominica is a stunningly beautiful island, and I had the great pleasure of participating in a number of hikes and other outdoor activities all around the island. I was also invited to various community events around the territory, like dinners, parties, musical shows, etc. And so that's just a very brief overview of my placement. I had an amazing experience in Dominica. I learned so much, and I'm very grateful to the wonderful people I met who welcomed me into their communities, into their homes, who shared their time and their knowledge and their food and their humor with me. Thanks also to Nathan for having been such a great placement partner. And thank you to everyone in the room today for coming out to see and hear our presentations. If anyone has any questions or if you want to know more about my placement, you can contact me at the email address on the screen. And that's it. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Nathan and Gabrielle. So does anyone have a question? Jerry?
Very interesting presentation, and I was wondering, it sounds like you did a lot of research and were confronted with a lot of material. In a nutshell, could you summarize, if it's possible, what were some of the key aspirations of the community that you were working in? Like what were some of the common visions and goals for development? And then also could you kind of contrast that with visions and aspirations of people in your home community at Peguis?
Yeah, clearly a lot of focus by the council and community members while we were there was trying to improve land management issues and related economic development. So they were trying to fix their issues in terms of land management and land use planning, some of the issues I talked about, but related to that, they were trying to find ways for community members and them as a community as a whole to access financing that Gabrielle talked about. So Gabrielle and I tried to work on that together. She looked at it from a financial point of view. I tried to look at it from a land point of view. We tried to come together that way. So I would say that was their goal, was to try improve or increase their economic development in the territory and related their land management issues that they were having. And but there's still a lot of work to do there. Like Gabrielle was saying, they're submitting a proposal to financial institutions to try look at accessing business loans for community members now, despite the challenges. But with land, you know, having a background in land management myself in terms of reserve lands and land use planning, it's a long-term issue that they have to deal with in terms of looking at developing a land use plan, deciding on what approach they want to take in terms of managing their lands. It's a huge area just in terms of land management on its own, as its own issue in terms of land management on reserves. There's different First Nations taking different approaches. Some things are working, some things are not. Different First Nations have different views of how they want to manage their own land. So there's still a lot that they have to look at and consider and decide upon in terms of land management. So.